Hello beautiful internet family, Dan here from danstube.tv, and today I've got my comprehensive comparison between the Mavic Mini, the Mini 2, and the newly released Mini SE. Now if you were to hand these drones to a random stranger on the street, they would probably have no idea what the differences are. If you look at them on face value, the drones look pretty much the exact same. The bodies are the same, the weight's the same, it really does look like the same drone, but there are some subtle differences between these three drones, and that's what this video is all about today. Now when you look at the bags, or I guess the cases that you get with these drones here, there are some slight differences between the three of them. The first difference is the Mini 2 bag looks completely different to the other two cases. So the Mini 2 bag is actually a shoulder bag that has a completely different design that resembles the Mavic Air and Air 2S bags. It's pretty much the exact same bag there. So if you're used to those types of drones and that type of kind of shoulder bag system, it's very similar. It's got 3 compartments in it that you can adjust, and you can put your controller, your batteries, and your drone in the bag. It fits comfortably. There's a fair bit of space in there actually, considering it's designed for larger drones, but it does the job and it seems to work really well. Now when you look at the other two cases, the Mini SE comes with a case that says DJI Mini on it, and then the Mavic Mini case comes with a case that says DJI Mavic on it. Very similar cases when you look at them. Now there were some issues with the Mavic Mini, and people were actually reporting, and I had something similar on my end, where the actual propellers were getting bent when you were putting it in the case, and a lot of people weren't putting it in the case properly. So it was this whole process where you had to make sure that the propellers didn't kind of open as you put it in the case, and yeah, it was quite easy to bend your propellers in the original Mavic Mini case. Now with the Mini SE case, the cutout is slightly different, and it seems to actually make a big difference when you put your drone in. It doesn't seem to bend the propellers like the original case did. Now when we look at the build quality between these three drones, the Mini SE is the same body as the Mini 2. The only difference is that the Mini 2 actually has a clickable status indicator button, where the Mini SE is not a clickable status indicator button. But besides that, they are pretty much identical when it comes down to the air intakes, the propellers that they've used, and even the batteries and charging hub that you get with the Mini SE. So when you do compare the Mini SE and the Mini 2, I guess, because they're very similar, to the original Mavic Mini, you can see that there have been some big improvements here just in terms of the materials and the overall build quality. So with the original Mavic Mini, it did have foam inserts that would actually kind of slot into the arms. Now it did a fine job, I had no issues with it, but you compare it to the harder plastic that they've used for the other two drones, it does actually produce a stronger arm, and overall it's a higher quality product. And then you can also look at the rear arms as well, and you can notice that the newer drones, the Mini SE and the Mini 2, again have improved build quality on those rear arms as well. So they are quite, I guess, important to look at when it comes to the overall build quality and wear and tear of the drones. But the main thing is that air intake. So the Mini 2 and the Mini SE actually have air intakes. They have grills that are above the camera there to allow air to flow through and cool down the internals. And with the Mavic Mini, you're getting stickers instead of air intakes. So that means that you actually don't have front air intakes. They're literally just stickers that look like grills, that look like air intakes. It's kind of crazy that that's a thing. I would imagine that the drone itself must run relatively cool. It mustn't have too many issues with overheating, seeing as they just don't have air intakes on the original Mavic Mini. Crazy to think, but the Mini SE and the Mini 2 have those air intakes on the front. All the footage that you'll see from the three drones will be in 2.7K at 25 frames per second. There will be a few clips later on in the video that are from the Mini 2 in 4K, and that's just so that I can show you what you're getting for that extra money. But I also just wanted to show you what 2.7K looked like from all of the three drones. I was expecting no major difference, seeing as they're using pretty much the same sensor here, and yeah, there's no major difference. It's clear that the 2.7K from all three drones is pretty much identical here, but you can see that big leap when you go to that 4K, which you'll see a little later on in the video. One of the more interesting things that I noticed during my test is that the Mini SE has less latency compared to the Mavic Mini. Now, when I went out in the field with my friend Ben, we actually figured out that it wasn't really a latency issue as much as it was a trailing issue. So basically, when you let go of the stick, it seems to have a trail of like a second where the drone just doesn't slow down. It just keeps turning a little bit, or it keeps moving up, or whatever direction you're putting into the stick. That input, for whatever reason, there's a trail after it. And that's with the Mavic Mini, where the Mini SE doesn't have as much of a trail. It's a lot more responsive, and it just, as you let go of the stick, it will actually stop moving. It won't have that trail with it. I don't know if that's just my Mavic Mini, but for whatever reason, the Mini SE is a lot more reliable when it comes to that controller input, and that actually makes a really big difference. I prefer that control over the Mavic Mini. They're both using enhanced Wi-Fi, which is ridiculous to me, but you know, you compare it to the Mini 2, which is using OcuSync and an improved controller system, but I would compare the Mini 2 to the Mini SE. They're both remarkably similar, where the Mavic Mini has that latency or that trail, which just is kind of annoying. It was also really interesting to see how the three drones handled the wind today. I know that it was actually quite a windy day, so it was a good test to see how well the three compared, and it was clear to me that the Mavic Mini was left far behind. It really did struggle when the wind started to hit it. I actually struggled to get it back when I was at about 50%. I was only about, maybe 250, 300 meters away, but I had to smash it into sports mode, and then even then it was struggling to cut through the wind. So that was a little bit of a heart racing moment. But the Mavic Mini, I've always had a little bit of issues with it in certain wind conditions. It's fine on like most days, but when the wind is just a little bit more aggressive, it definitely does struggle. Now, if I compare that to the Mini SE and the Mini 2, they were both fine in the wind that I had it in today. So, it's interesting to see that improvement in the wind resistance actually does make a big difference here. Both the Mini SE and the Mini 2 performed pretty much identically, and they handled the wind really well. The fact that they have that improved wind resistance over the Mavic Mini actually made a significant difference today during my test. And now moving on to battery life, there's really no major difference here. Great battery life on all three drones. I'm probably getting on average maybe 20 to 25 minutes per battery, maybe 25 minutes if I'm really pushing it and I'm flying nice and close by as I'm getting down to those, final percentages where I'm at like maybe 25% and I'm just flying nice and low to the ground and playing around with it. It seems to be fine, and I'm getting close to 25 minutes with the three drones. So no like major difference between the battery life, and that was kind of expected. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the Mini SE is using the body of the Mini 2 with the internals of the Mavic Mini. So the Mini SE actually does have stronger arms than the original Mavic Mini. It also has orange tipped propellers instead of the grey tipped propellers of the Mavic Mini. And it's also using a USB-C charging port, which is a really nice addition as well. When we look at the 2.7K footage from the three drones, there's no clear winner here. They all look pretty much the same at 2.7K, and this was expected, there's no crazy difference. It's not like the Mini 2 has a larger sensor, or it's not like it's using something completely different to the other two drones. As I kind of suspected early on, it's almost like a software limitation by the looks of it with the Mavic Mini and Mini SE, where the Mini 2 has that 4K printed on the camera and it can shoot in 4K, but you look at the cameras and they're pretty much identical cameras. There's no clear difference between them. So I really wasn't expecting the 2.7K to look different between the three drones, and this test really shows that they're pretty much identical here. So now when we look at the Mini 2 compared to the Mavic Mini and the Mini SE, why would you want the Mini 2 over these other two drones? Now, there are some clear improvements here, and it's definitely the better drone, but it's not a massive leap. So I think first comes first is the Mini SE is clearly the best beginner drone right now, the best budget drone. It's cheaper than the Mavic Mini and it has better wind resistance than the Mavic Mini. It also has a better build quality and it's using the batteries and the charging hub from the Mini 2. So the Mini SE is the clear winner for the budget drone of 2021. But then when you look at the Mini 2 and why you would want that over the other two drones, it is definitely an improvement and it's worth the money if you want to get something a little bit better. So first comes first is the controller design. So it's a new controller. It's actually a better controller in my opinion. I love the feel of it. I love the build quality. I love the fact that I don't have to take my phone out of its case to put it into the actual clamp. And I also really love that unibody design where I don't have to poke out antennas and angle them in all different directions. It's just a really nice improvement, and that improved range makes a big difference. And I definitely noticed that today during my tests. The Mavic Mini and the Mini SE with that enhanced Wi-Fi would occasionally drop out, where the OcuSync from the Mini 2 was solid and reliable throughout the entire test. The other clear reason why you would want the Mini 2 is for that 4K camera. Again, like I mentioned earlier on, it's really hard to imagine that this isn't just a software limitation with the Mavic Mini and the Mini SE, seeing as the cameras look identical and you look behind the scenes at the specs and they're pretty much identical. So it's really hard to believe that anything major has gone on here. It's more so just a software limitation. But regardless, the 4K from the Mini 2 is gorgeous and it definitely is worth that upgrade if you want a 4K enabled drone. It does look fantastic, and putting in the 4K now to compare it to the 2.7K footage that we saw before, it is a marketable improvement that you would want this drone over the other drones if you're looking for a 4K drone. So where does that leave us at the end of this comparison here? It's really interesting to see that we have 3 different mini drones from DJI. They're all fantastic drones, and regardless of which one you're going to choose, you're going to be happy with it, because I've had no issues with any of the drones. They all work phenomenally well. But I think, when it comes down to a clear budget winner, like I said before, the Mini SE is a fantastic price, and those improvements, those slight improvements over the Mavic Mini, actually do make a big difference. They're like quality of life updates, but that wind resistance is a practical update that I actually did notice today during my tests. It was really windy. The Mavic Mini just couldn't handle it compared to the Mini SE. So the Mini SE is the clear winner here for the best budget drone, where if we compare the Mini 2 to the other two drones, it's the clear winner for the best overall budget drone. So yes, it's a bit more expensive. It's not the cheapest budget drone on the market, but it is the best 4K budget drone on the market right now. The Mini 2 is phenomenal, and I love that improved range and that 4K camera. So I'd love your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will chat to you in the next one, and peace.